Hello and welcome to the Catch-Up for July 2024. I'm Paul from Give Toke.
And I'm Christina from AusCannaReviews.
And we come together each month to explore what's happening in cannabis in Australia and around the world. Be sure to check out the show notes in your podcast app to find out all the different ways you can get in touch with us. I know for me, it's givetoke@gmail.com. And for Christina, it's
AusCannaReviews@gmail.com.
So to kick it off with a bit of housekeeping, we want to mention the fact that last month we covered a story on Dr. Jamie Rickard leaving Ananda Clinics and potentially leaving the industry. We just want to issue a bit of a retraction there, noting that Dr. Rickard has simply changed clinics. So apologies to Dr. Rickard and apologies to Christian Bale. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge what's going on in Thailand, because as they continue to inch closer to cannabis reform, it still seems very messy and volatile over there. So we're not giving a solid update on this because it's a fluid situation. We've been seeing peaceful demonstrations this week aimed at the government's seeming lack of consultation with appropriate stakeholders, and the situation remains unstable and it's unclear what the future of cannabis in Thailand is. We've had hunger strikes this week. There's a really important working group trying to get the health minister to listen to them. So yeah, Thailand is not looking great, and again, I urge people to get over there before January 1st to enjoy that. Diving straight into current affairs, our first story. Doctors warn of significant increase in people hospitalized with psychosis after being prescribed medicinal cannabis. And this comes from ABC News on the 21st of July. So Professor Brett Emerson, Queensland chair of the Royal Australian and New Zealand's College of Psychiatrists, says the college wants stronger regulations on medicinal cannabis products and prescribing practices. Emerson claims medicinal cannabis is causing harm to patients, with doctors warning of a significant increase in people ending up in hospital with psychosis. Their concerns come amid a proliferation of telehealth clinics in Australia offering consultations with few checks. So this is a hot, fresh story coming to us right off the press this morning, Christina. It's a very spicy one. There's a lot to go through here. So what are your takes on this one?
I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to this. This isn't a bad thing. I do think one of the interesting things that they're talking about, the age group for the rise in psychosis. I believe it was 16 to 21.
Yeah, so they're saying there's a 10% increase in psychosis in Queensland hospitals for that age group.
Yeah, and so I would think that because of their age, they would be getting more consultation, there would be more follow-up, there would be more dictation and notes and things like that. You would be asking more medical history and things like that because, as a 16-year-old, how do you know that you might be predisposed to a mental illness of some sort? But if a doctor is doing their due diligence, and one of the things that the article talks about is the telehealth and the burn and turn. And you and I have had multiple conversations about how we're not fans of the burn and turn. Again, in this situation, there's no way that a burn and turn clinic is getting the proper medical history of a 16-year-old. So again, I can see Emerson's concern here, especially if it's that age group that are having the spike. Somewhere along the line, somebody's not doing their due diligence. So again, I'm not opposed to this. I think more checks and balances should be there.
I certainly agree with that factor, and I know my doctor personally has hesitations prescribing cannabis to people under 25 and doesn't prescribe it to people under 21. She'll find other options and other routes for treatment for people that age. I'm not so sure that Professor Emerson has all his ducks in a row here, because it feels very reactive to an age group that probably shouldn't be using cannabis on a high level anyway, or potentially shouldn't be using. So to say that, a bunch of 16 or 21-year-olds are being hospitalized with psychosis or cannabis, we need to regulate everyone's use of it, I think is really unfair. You and I are both grown adults who have a lot of say over our medical journey. We work with doctors who appreciate and trust the say that we have. And Professor Emerson doesn't make me feel like someone that I'd want to see about my concerns. He says there's no evidence to support cannabis for insomnia and anxiety. Well, let's get the evidence. Let's not just say, well, there is none, so it can't be used for it. He calls cannabis a drug of dependence, which it has the potential to be, but this is putting it in the same category as nicotine, morphine, heroin, amphetamines, alcohol. We know that cannabis is different to those drugs. He claims that the medical cannabis industry is marketing cures. We constantly talk about the restrictions on marketing, so I don't think that's fair to say. You know, the medical cannabis industry does talk about the potential for treatment, but there are not cures being marketed here. We're not idiots here. Cannabis is not a panacea. He then also goes on to claim that THC should be banned and restricted to treatments for epilepsy and cancer. And that's just such reductive thinking. You know, that's 20-year-old thinking. We know it works really well for those things, but we're finding it works for other things. And finally, I'm going to go in a little bit on his claim that for anxiety and insomnia, all you need is a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy from a good psychologist. Now, I'm going to speak from experience here. I've been doing CBT for 12 years, but as someone who has benefited from CBT, I'm going to talk about some of the problems with it. It oversimplifies complex human experiences. It has the potential to only deal with the here and now. So when I have a great CBT session, I feel amazing for a month, but I need to go back. You know, I do then need to go back and I need to do other things. It leans a lot on positive thinking, which I'm not always capable of. It leans on extra work that you do that people in the pits can't always do when they're struggling. And finally, there's no tangible way to track impact. So this is not me criticizing CBT, but for him to reduce down that someone with anxiety and insomnia only needs a good psychologist for CBT tells me this guy isn't doing his due diligence on the full medicinal impact on cannabis. So back to your point, I agree. There's some need for some regulation. There's need for us to address the cowboys in the industry. But as someone who uses cannabis for anxiety and insomnia and depression, full disclosure, I think there are other things here, whether it's old outdated ideas, whether it's vested interests. I'm really concerned to see how critical he is of cannabis based on one small concerning piece of data.
I think for me, the big pull out of the article was him kind of hinging it on that age group.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I do feel like, let's talk from personal experience. At 16, I didn't have the migraines that I do now. And at 16, I didn't understand that that's what I was having. I couldn't really articulate it. I just knew I was having these wicked headaches. And, you know, I didn't know that I had endometriosis at the time. I just, again, knew that I was having these horrible periods that were leaving me on the floor crying in a fetal position. And so I feel like that age group, looking back on my own personal experience, definitely needs more advocacy for them so they can understand. They definitely, before we start going straight to cannabis, we should be trying other things first, like what you're saying with therapy, with this, with that. It's cannabis, you know, for us, we have tried all these other things.
Look, we don't want anyone to go for this as the first port of call. For me, it's exercise, it's eating well, it's seeing a therapist, it's cannabis. You know, those four things together, when I've got them firing on all cylinders, life's great. I am just concerned because while I think there's very good reason to call for reform in this industry, particularly in managing some of the cowboy approaches with some of the bigger companies that do seem to, you know, maybe profit over patients, I think it, again, feels like that very Australian response to punish everyone because there are some bad players. And I just would love to see those areas of concern being addressed. So we talk about cannabis hyperemesis syndrome being a concern, you know, where people present themselves as vomiting due to overuse of cannabis. Well, let's address that issue rather than taking cannabis away from everyone. Let's understand that, you know, cannabis can be part of a multi-pronged approach. It just does seem a little bit concerning how much this guy's willing to just rip it all out and, you know, potentially return people back to pharmaceutical drugs that also come with their own side effects and concerns. So I've got no problem with regulation. I'm just not sure that this guy has listened to the people enough.
I'll agree with you on that one.
Moving on to our next story, this is Snoop Dogg opens first pot shop and launches 2-pack cannabis line. So coming from Forbes on the 15th of July, hip-hop icon Snoop Dogg opened his first licensed cannabis dispensary over the weekend, offering Los Angeles residents and visitors a glimpse into the rapper's world and a new option for legal marijuana purchases. Thoughts on this one, Christina?
Meh. Like, okay, like I get Snoop Dogg, I get him opening a store, I get all of that, but I don't know where the Tupac cannabis line fits into that. I feel like that's kind of commercializing on Tupac himself, right? I'd like to believe that Snoop had a conversation with Tupac's mom and Athena was all on board and da 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 da. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Tupac when he was still alive. I remember seeing him in movies, Above the Rim, Poetic Justice, like all of this. And I don't really remember cannabis being such an integrated part of who he was like it was with Snoop.
Like, I'm all for the culture being fed. This is one of the most exciting things about an adult use market is tapping into the culture of cannabis rather than just, the benefits for patients. We'll hopefully get there one day. I don't care about celebrity endorsements in general. I certainly don't when it comes to cannabis. And, I'm a fan of Snoop Dogg. I'm a huge fan of Tupac. The Tupac brand is the tackiest part for me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need the holograms. I don't need the branded weed. We've got the music. Let the dude rest in peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Tacky is probably the best way to describe that. I'm with you. I do. I just feel like it's really tacky. I don't know.
And this, has obviously come at the time as well that, we've heard that Snoop Dogg's released cannabis on the Australian market. So it's just interesting to look at all these cannabis ventures and think about the implications of that. While we're on the topic of Snoop Dogg, do you have any hot takes about Snoop Dogg's launch in Australia?
Again.
Yeah. I feel like talking about it, we're already giving it more than it deserves. Look, I've seen his cannabis in Canada. One of the products I absolutely adored. The rest, you could take or leave. They were ultimately grown by Canada's biggest company. There wasn't that much that was special about them. So, as long as it's good, that's probably the most important thing.
I'm with you. I don't need celebrity endorsements for my cannabis. I don't need it for my medication. I'm good.
Moving on to our next story, $42 million of drugs seized in Queensland police operation. So this comes directly from the Queensland Police on the 9th of July. So Operation Whiskey Alon, led by detectives from the Drug and Serious Crime Group State Drug Squad, targeted a major international drug syndicate involved in the manufacturing of cannabis. Detectives have seized $42 million worth of drugs and plants following the arrest of 6 people in cannabis raids across southeast Queensland. So this one's an interesting one because we kind of need to ask ourselves, you look at the videos and images of this operation and we need to ask ourselves, why is taking the risk on an operation of this size worth it? And that's cash for the black market. As Jeremy Buckingham says, cannabis is the rocket fuel for the black market as funds raised for cannabis allow them to purchase other harder drugs. This is where we get into the real gateway drug argument because cannabis can clearly make bikies a bunch of cash so they can sell a bunch of ice. So prohibition is profitable for criminals in Queensland. And while the Queensland police pat themselves on the back for this raid and for taking illicit drugs out of our community, they should be looking at the reasons why something of this size, a facility of this size, exists in the first place. And that's because people want to consume cannabis and we should be regulating it and legalizing it. Because imagine how many of these facilities they haven't caught, they haven't busted, they haven't raided. There's a bunch of these facilities still out there.
I love the fact that they pat themselves on the back, but you're right. They never really step back and they ask, well, why is this happening? And how do we really get to the root of why it's happening? And how do we actually stop it?
Ultimately, we want to see cannabis regulated. I've got friends that are police who have entered facilities like that and know that these people could be in real jobs, the ones that are actually cultivating and doing it, not necessarily the bikies that are running it from behind the scenes. But there are real growers and real cultivators that love and care about cannabis in these illicit markets. Let's get them, doing it for realsies.
I agree, man. It's an untapped market of intelligent growers because to grow it on that type of scale, you got to have some sort of skill.
Moving on to our next story, Labor youth push for recreational cannabis green light in New South Wales. So coming from the Canberra Times on June 15th, in submissions to the Minns Labor government, New South Wales Young Labor has recommended the state legalise the consumption of cannabis and to legalise the possession of cannabis for personal use for those aged 18 and over. It's called upon New South Wales to follow the model of ACT in allowing adults to possess and grow 2 cannabis plants with a maximum of 4 per household. So this is exciting. This is young people speaking up for their future. We know that youth alcohol consumption is dropping. We know that there are generally more informed decisions being made and certainly the potential for more informed decisions being made. So it's great to see young people, not just going, hey man, give us some weed. They're talking about harm minimization. They're talking about legalization. They're talking about taxation. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Minns government does with this upcoming drug summit.
I'd like to see some changes to the driving laws, but that's I suppose a pipe dream, right? Like, but to even open up the conversation about adults being able to have 2 plants, 4 maximum per household following the ACT. Look, the ACT didn't fall apart. Things seem to be doing okay over there. So if we could get another state to kind of say, okay, you know what, we are going to follow them and we are going to follow in suit and we're going to do this. And those are progressive steps forward. As much as I want to see home grow amnesty, I would rather see changes to the driving laws first. That's just me though.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have become such a pessimist about the driving laws because after 2 years of advocating so strongly for it and not seeing much change, it's hard to be enthusiastic about when that change is going to come. And some people in the loop have said to me that they believe that we will get some form of adult use cannabis before we'll even get those driving regulations, just because of the obsession in finding something that's similar to the blood alcohol test. And smart people know that there's not going to be a comparable test like that, but we're still very much in the discovery phase, and it's going to take a long time to convince some of those people that have come round to cannabis but haven't come round to the driving, to convince them that we need to look at this differently. So I agree, that's obviously the most pressing thing. But I do think in the midst of a lot of talk about reform for cannabis in Australia that will potentially make it more restrictive, there's a working group in New South Wales who have suggested, in light of the recent controversies, that patients should be only allowed 30% of their prescription to be flower. So we're talking about some pretty brash suggestions for reform. I'm not saying we're going to get those, but knowing that they're being discussed, home grow would be a great way to kind of offset, some potential restrictions that might be coming to cannabis dispensing in our country. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm certainly happy to see that, young, educated people, that care about politics see that this is an issue. As they look around the world, we know that lots of places care about this and lots of places are trying something. So fingers crossed for New South Wales. I always thought it would be Victoria that would get this stuff done first, and we're hopefully, I'm all for it. Leave us in the dust, New South Wales. Get this done. Well, that's it for news and current affairs for this month. As always, there's lots of things going on in the cannabis world, so make sure you're staying abreast of the latest and greatest from reliable sources. We're going to move on now to another segment. In an attempt to highlight advancements in the world of cannabis research, it's now time for a new segment called It's Science, where we'll aim to give a short, sharp update each month on something relating to the field of cannabis science research. So, remembering that this is not medical advice, Christina, take it away. What have you found out in the world of science this month?
There was an amazing study that just got published that was co-authored by Ethan Russo, which
legend
within his own right. Entourage effect. Great stuff. In this study, they studied the acute effects of CBG on anxiety, stress, and mood. This was one of those studies that everybody asked for. It was double-blind, placebo-controlled study, which is amazing, right? And the big takeaway was there was a significant main effect of CBG, overall reductions in anxiety, as well as reductions in stress. CBG also enhanced verbal memory relative to placebo. There was also no evidence of subjective drug effects or impairment, which is huge because that means CBG may represent a novel option to reduce stress and anxiety in healthy adults.
This is really exciting because CBG, cannabidiol, is one of the, I wouldn't say lesser known cannabinoids. It's an emerging cannabinoid now that the conversation is moving on from just CBD and THC. And this is really exciting because we are starting to see products on our market where the content of other cannabinoids are being mentioned, so people can start to choose these products and see if they work for these conditions for them.
Yeah. Like I said, this study was huge because, again, it's that double-blind, placebo-controlled, which is what everybody pushes back on. They're like, how do you know? How do you know? Well, here you go. Now we do know. We've done a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And what did it show? That it does actually work for stress and anxiety by reducing them.
So for me, for It's Science this month, from an article published by Normal Canada presenting the findings from the UK journal International Clinical Psychopharmacology, a recent observational study has shown that patients with inflammatory arthritis report sustained relief by using cannabis. So measuring patient-reported outcomes at intervals across 12 months, researchers found that patients consistently report improved quality of life due to a reduction in pain, reduced anxiety, and improved sleep. So the study shows at a minimum minimum, there is reason to continue to investigate the effects of cannabis-based medicines in this setting. So this was going in for arthritic pain, and they found some other benefits too. So it's an exciting step towards reducing polypharmacy potentially, because someone who has arthritis may also be dealing with chronic pain that is a result of having a chronic condition. They may have anxiety, they may struggle to sleep. So we might start to see cannabis as a potential treatment replacing a multitude of drugs. So for me, it's exciting, and it's really cool to know that, you know, in addition to all the news and current affairs we cover, that there is this data out there. There are these research projects going on, and I'm really excited to see what more we can find. So as, you know, on one end in Australia, they're talking about making restrictions because we don't have evidence. Hey, a lot of this evidence is emerging. A lot of this is cause for excitement. So there's a couple of really cool things there for, you know, patients and supporters and advocates for cannabis to be excited about with tangible results.
You're absolutely right. As one group is saying, blah, 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 it's bad, it's this, we should take it away. Don't give up. The other side is saying, hey, check it out. We're still studying. We're still doing these projects. We're still trying to bring the evidence. We'll get there.
Exactly. Well, shifting to hot tokes, this is our opportunity to get off any spicy takes from our chest, anything we want to share with each other, with the people. Christina, do you have a hot toke this month?
You know me, every now and then I like to spice it up and do more caliente, hot, as opposed to I'm cranky about things hot. And I just want to give a shout out because there was a story that came out in cannabis literally a couple of days ago talking about the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association and how it marked its 4th anniversary. And what they're doing is they're rolling out its nationwide compassionate access scheme. Oh God, I'm so like pumped about this because you have companies that are coming to the table now to be able to offer products to people who can't afford them, which I think is, you know, maybe we'll never get on the PBS, but to be able to have companies step up to the table and say, we want to do a compassionate access scheme and to back it and to be a part of it. I think it's amazing. So I just want to do a quick little shout out because Tasmanian Botanics is set to contribute almost $1 million worth of product. And some of the other companies that are also going to be involved are Humacology, Alma, Mother Plant, Aura Therapeutics, BOD, Chemivar, Medibus, MediQuest, and Medbox Pharma. Big, huge shout out to those companies for, again, coming to the table and saying, let's do this compassionate access program. So not angry this month. It's more, oh, caliente. More of this, please. I like it.
I'm very pleased to see this. I'm really glad to see the industry seeing their responsibility in building the profile of cannabis, you know, on one side, but also increasing access in a healthy way. You know, this is looking to improve access for people that are disadvantaged in some way. It's a multi-tier system. There's some people that are going to be covered completely, some people whose postage is going to be covered, and some people who are going to get discounted products. And it's really exciting to see the industry step up in lieu of an absent government. You know, we know that the conversation is still unsure about what cannabis can and can't do. Well, the companies that have, you know, invested their livelihoods in it, that are putting themselves out there, they're dedicating money to this cause, and I'm really proud to see it. So big shout out to all those companies that are committed to this because it's a really great initiative.
What about you? Do you have a hot toke this month?
Yeah, and we, you know, we've alluded to it to an extent, and that is, you know, celebrity weed, it's just got to be good. You know, that's the most important thing. Your name is not going to excuse an inferior product. Many have tried and failed in this space. You know, in Canada alone, Snoop had Leafs by Snoop. Wiz Khalifa had Khalifa Kush extracts. Dan Bilzerian had some masculine thing with bullhorns I can't remember the name of. Seth Rogen had Houseplant. Drake had or has Bull Rider. These are not the brands people are talking about. So the most important thing you can do is make sure that you've got a great quality product, make sure that it is appropriately priced, and that's what people are going to care about. So with Snoop Dogg's weed arriving in Australia, you know, God, I've given it even more attention again. You know, I guess the thing that I want to remind people is quality is important. Appropriate pricing is important. It doesn't really matter who the guy is because it's just some giant company growing it anyway. So make sure that you're buying products that work for you. And you don't need to be lining Snoop Dogg's pocket if that's not a product that works for you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I feel like some of you guys are too young to remember Snoop Dogg's Girls Gone Wild stage.
Yeah, the softcore Snoop Dogg DVDs and VHSs that were available. Yeah, I remember them being in like older brothers collections kind of things. Yeah.
Look, no hate. He's gotta pay bills just like the rest of us. But again, I'm with you, Paul. Don't buy Snoop Dogg's cannabis because it's Snoop Dogg's because you need to give him some money. He doesn't, because I assure you he's still getting residuals off of the Girls Gone Wild stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's still living off 1996. Yeah, well, I think that's good. Neither of us are up on our soapboxes this month. Neither of us are angry, but there's a lot to be thought about there with both our takes, the science, and also news and current affairs. So, as we wrap up, Christina, what can we expect from AusCannaReviews this month?
Well, I just did my Amnesia Haze review, and it seems appropriate because it's winter and it's cold out. So tea review is coming out from
Awesome.
Heyday's Teas. Super excited about that. And then we're wrapping up the month with Royale.
Nice. I actually think this is a good chance to talk about paradoxical effects of cannabis, just while you mention Amnesia Haze, because this is a product that I've been using for the last couple of months. A little goes a long way for me. The quote-unquote sativa types are not typically something I'm drawn towards. But I really enjoyed your review. It was a really great review. But I want to talk about the effects it has on you versus the effects it has on me. So you mentioned that it kind of isn't necessarily a high focused one. You can get a little bit dreamy, daydreamy, off with the fairies and things like that. It's the exact opposite for me. So I have it so rarely. As soon as I have it, it's extreme focus, extreme clarity, and that's me getting the job done. So I think this is one of the things people always need to remember about cannabis is people can have, I wouldn't say they're entirely different effects. They're still on the same spectrum of energizing, but it is just good to know sometimes, hey, something that works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. Like my best mate, he is the sativa guy if I am the indica guy, quote unquote. So we can never kind of find an alignment on the same products. We need very distinctly different things. So I just thought that was interesting. A lot of people will read a review and go, that didn't do that for me. But it's because, all our biochemistry is different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it it did help me focus. It did for sure. It's just every so often, like I said in the review, I don't know, I just kind of spaced out or lost my train of thought. I was like, oh man, what was I just doing there? Like I'd be deep in thought about something and I would just, like I said, I would just lose it. I don't know. I giggle about it now because like I said, you learn how to roll with the punches and you get used to things and you adjust for sure. I think one of the things I always get a kick out of is when I say something gives me the munchies, because I'm always like, is that just me? Is it like, am I hungry? Am I hungry because I didn't have breakfast?
That was the other thing. No appetite.
No, really?
None. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Like it's in a good way. Like it's nice for me to not want to eat.
I love it, Paul. I love it. We like complete 180. Like I love it. It gave me the munchies and I got a little spacey and you were like, no munchies, focus. I got things done. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's always interesting. And that, it doesn't tell us that, cannabis is inconsistent. It tells us you've got to find what works for you. That's always that stoner joke. There's a meme that floats around. It's like, have you ever met that weed guy who's, when you tell them that you don't like smoking weed, they're like, oh, you just haven't found the right weed. We are those guys, really. But it's true. It's true. I'm not going to say it works for everyone, but hey, if you've had a bad experience with something, there might be something else out there that works.
For sure. 100%. 100% though. Oh, I love it. Paul, what's new with Give Toke this month?
Yeah, I was really lucky, and actually, connected with your help. I took a little trip down to Tasmania a couple of weeks ago to see the Tasmanian Botanics facility and interview Dan Howard. So that was an amazing trip, an amazing experience, and that episode is out right now. I really like Dan because he's a straight shooter. He's brought a lot of knowledge from Canada, from the Canadian cannabis market, but also just big business, down to Tasmania to help Australian grown cannabis become a bigger deal. And I really respect that. So I really enjoyed that trip. I've also got an upcoming episode, which I'm really excited about, potentially my most wanted guest and certainly my most requested guest, and that's Dr. Riley Kirk, who is known on Instagram as CannabiChem, and she is an absolutely amazing resource for cannabis science and research, and also just plant medicine in general. So I got off that call, giddy like a little fanboy that, I'd met a cannabis celebrity. Truly one of my favorite episodes ever. Like I often say, I've never done a bad episode, but God, this one is fantastic. She is so smart, so knowledgeable, so humble. It's a very easy hour and 10 to listen to. I like to tighten my pods down if they go over an hour. There was nothing to cut from Riley Kirk's episode. So I'm really excited about that one.
I'm excited for that one. I'm jealous. She's so cool. I mean, I don't know her. I just kind of, stalk her on Instagram.
Yeah. And look, we mentioned Kitty Chopika from Thailand last month. I would say the same about Riley. If you're not following her, you're really missing out on an important slice of the cannabis world. So that episode will be out next Monday if you're listening to this when this is released. So I'm really excited about that. And finally, as always, I'll pump the merch. We've got the smell-proof bags at giveandtoke.com.au, the trays, and I have upped the CATCHUP code to $10 off. So CATCHUP at checkout. That will get you $10 off your purchase. And a big thank you to the people that have taken us up on that offer. It's been really cool to see names of people I don't know buying the merch, enjoying it. I've been traveling a lot lately. The smell-proof bag's been going through customs without any qualms. So if you're in the market for stylish, discreet, lockable, smell-proof bag, head to giveandtoke.com.au.
I love it. Shameless plug. I love it. Anyways, that's it for this month. You can find me at AusCannaReviews. I don't know where you can find me.
I used my website, so now you're claiming that you've got one too.
No, I don't have a website. Look, point is you can find me in a lot of places on Substack, Instagram, X, AusCannaReviews. That's who I am.
That's right. You can find me on Instagram at Give Toke, on the website giveandtoke.com.au, and the whole list of contact details for both of us are in the show notes below.
Oh man, be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star ratings in the review. And of course, tell a friend about the show. I'm Christina.
And I'm Paul.
Thanks for listening.
Nice.
Fuck, what happened to the end? I was like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I do not have a website.
Just losing it.